working really hard. You're not working hard enough. I need results. Class dismissed.
As educators, we have the ability to help guide our students' lives in the right directions. A student doesn't necessarily care about what you know until they know that you care. You have to build that connection with our students so we know that they trust us.
My crazy English teacher from last year is the only person that made me think of hope. Talking with friends about last year's English and our trips, I began to feel better.
Educators should understand that students have different learning styles and that some students may even require a little more attention in order to achieve success. That way, teachers will be able to meet the needs of all their students. It is imperative that teachers monitor the progress of their students in hopes of being able to meet their academic needs. To do so, it is critical that we incorporate materials and lessons that students find interesting, materials that they're able to relate to. And this is me, 24-year-old Samantha Cisneros. I identify as a Latinx woman. I come from two very loving parents, and I also have a little sister who's about 7 years younger than me, so you could only imagine the type of fights we would get into growing up. I was born and raised in Central America, more specifically in San Salvador. When I was about 5 years old, my parents decided it was time that we escape the harsh realities of our country, and we decided to move to Annapolis, Maryland. We lived in Maryland for about 10 years. After those 10 years, my dad thought it was time to be closer to family, so we decided to move to California. At 15 years old, I was just experiencing the greatest culture shock one could imagine. Living in Annapolis and then moving to California was two completely different ballgames. From my education system to the people I was surrounded by, and even the weather. I wasn't too great at coping with the move, and it took me about 10 years, which would be me right now, to finally adjust to it and be okay. My high school career started at Annapolis Senior High School in Annapolis, Maryland, and it ended at Silverado High School in Victorville, California. I transferred to Silverado the middle of my sophomore year, which was a very hard transition for me. I had some of the most amazing teachers at Annapolis, but then I came to California and I realized how much better the education system was here. My intentions for becoming a teacher weren't because I encountered a lot of bad teachers in my time. It was more so because I wanted to keep that narrative of how amazing and impactful teachers can be to a student's life. As a Latinx woman teaching English, I am already defying the odds. English became my favorite subject when I encountered teachers that would teach me things I could relate to, authors like Sandra Cisneros, instead of people like Anne Bradstreet. I felt safe in a classroom where I was learning something that I could relate to. I was learning things that are literally happening in my backyard, and authors like Sandra Cisneros let me know that I wasn't alone. As teachers, it is important to remember that our students are humans and that they may also be dealing with real life situations outside of our classroom. In her article, Culturally Responsive Teaching, Geneva Gay mentions how impactful being culturally responsive to your students may be. She says, culturally responsive teachers develop intellectual, social, emotional, and political learning by using cultural resources to teach knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes. She also mentions how important it is to relate your material back to your students. She mentions that culturally responsive teaching can be defined as using the cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of reference, and performance styles of ethnically diverse students to make learning encounters more relevant to and effective for the students. In Parquet's chapter, Today's Students, he mentions how impactful a student's social economic status can be. As a daughter of refugees to this country, my upbringing could allow me as a teacher to relate to students who are either immigrants to this country or students who grew up in poverty like I did. In his reading, Parquet mentions that although some Spanish speaking immigrants come to the United States hoping to escape a life of poverty in their home country, many others come because they have relatives in the United States or they wish to take advantage of the business opportunities in this country. For those Spanish speaking immigrants who lack job skills and have little education, however, adjusting to the complexities and demands of life in the United States may be difficult. As teachers, it is important to remember that our students are also humans. We have to remember that these kids are going through life day by day, tackling battles that they're probably not even talking to people about. We have to remember that learning for them isn't always easy and that they all have different learning styles. As teachers, we have to remember that not all strategies will work for all of our students. We have to be responsive to each and every one of our students, learning what works for them. As I continue to embark on my journey as a teacher, I will always try to take into consideration the struggles I encountered as a student then and the struggles I encounter as a student now. Being a student isn't easy. It's probably one of the toughest things I've done, but it's also been one of the most rewarding. One of my greatest strengths as a teacher will be how big my heart is and how much I care about those who surround me. My teachers have impacted me positively in more ways than one. As I embark on my journey as a teacher, I could only hope to have the type of impact on my students that my teachers had on me.